Hello, welcome back to the channel. Thanks for joining me in another of my monologues. There's a couple of posters that I'll put up promoting a couple of events that you might be interested in. So today, as you can see, I'm in a slightly different position. It's always nice to find different places to film in the house to give a bit of variety. It's just something I enjoy doing. And thank you to the commenter who said, you know, enjoyed the lighting of the previous video that I did. That's very kind of you. And to somebody else who said, oh, you're in a closet. It's just, it's, you know, it takes out the monotony. That's what I like. Anyway, today I wanted to talk about freedom. And I think of freedom as an attitude of mind. It is really quite difficult to think of ourselves as free. And we ought to be free, oughtn't we? We ought to be free to make our own decisions. Obviously, you're going to take into account circumstances around you, and one wants to be as honourable as possible, to think about other people, put yourself into their shoes so you're not annoying them or upsetting them if you're doing things. But at the same time, we ought to be free to be able to do the things that we want. We've found ourselves on this earth, and it does appear that we are, not that you would think it, the way that we've treated everything, but the most intelligent of creatures here. Now, that may well be debatable. Some people will say, well, hang on a minute, look at these animals and look at those mammals or those birds. They seem to be far more intelligent than us. They don't seem to destroy the habitat that they live in, and they don't seem to be continually having wars with one another. And I grant you that there is that level of sophistication to other animals than us. We seem to be hell-bent on self-destruct, don't we? Although you could say that a lot of that is actually manipulated. You and I don't ask to go to war. You and I don't try to beat the other man down and take advantage of it. Now, I know there's always going to be some bad eggs in the nest, but generally most people do get on. And the term anarchy, self-rule, I think is probably a much better system than we've got. But I think freedom is an attitude of mind. And if I can just go on a little bit about why I think that, it is a difficult thing to keep that idea in one's mind, because we have been so brainwashed by institutions, by the state, by governments, by councils, who have set themselves up as higher authorities to us. And we know that because every time you want to do something, there are rules, there are regulations, there are things that you've got to adhere to. You must stay, for example, you know, on the left-hand side of the road. Now, to me, that's probably a sensible rule, that if you're driving or you're travelling in your conveyance, and everybody stays on the left-hand side in this country, you're not going to crash and have head-on collisions. That makes a lot of sense. And even to a certain degree, some of the speed restrictions on the roads makes a certain amount of sense. Not all of them, of course, and these rules and regulations in which you just accidentally go over the top and then a gantry camera takes a photograph of you and you've offended the authorities. There's been an offence and they're so offended that they're going to fine you to try and curb you, I suppose, in future from doing too much speeding. That's when it sort of, to me, gets into a bit of a grey area, because on the one hand, some rules of living are useful, especially if we all agree to them, and others are downright penal if we haven't agreed to them and they've been set up by a bunch of people that we've perhaps not asked to do it, or to given our permission, if you like, to come to these rules. Now, As you know, I'm going to be looking for a piece of land. I am looking for a piece of land. We've seen several and we're talking about what we can do with it. And suddenly, of course, there's a great swathe of things that you are told that you can or you can't do with this land. A change of use, for example. Somebody the other day, thank you, Barry, was telling me about a gentleman, an old gentleman in his 80s, who was fined £3,000 because he planted potatoes in a field, and somebody came along, discovered what he'd done and reported it to the council, and the council came down on him like a ton of bricks and says, you've done a change of use, you can't do that. And you just think, he's planting potatoes, for goodness sake. He's not setting fire to hayricks. He's not setting up bunkers so that he can send off cannons to destroy somebody else. He's not put a 1960s brutalist car park on there, or building, or a big tower block. He's not put 1,000 new builds in there. He's only put it in potatoes, and at the end of the season, what has happened to that field at the end of it? Not a lot. And yet he is fined £3,000 for doing that. Now, I'm sure there'll be a myriad of people out there with a plethora of different problems that they've had, that the council have come down with their busybody clipboards and said, oh, you can't do that, you know, and this doesn't abide to our regulations and all of this. And yet it shouldn't. We as people find ourselves, and this may be a debatable point, born onto a planet on the earth, on whatever it is, this surface that we're on. We didn't necessarily ask to be here, or at least perhaps our higher self, our spiritual self. Let's not go into all of that because some people find that difficult. But we just find ourselves here, and already there are these rules and regulations that you suddenly come into. You know, you cannot take shelter behind sufficient walls with a roof without having to pay a council of people for the privilege. Not only do you have to buy the property that you're in, but you then pay the council just to shelter. And I find this absolutely abhorrent. Yes, you might want to contribute to the local amenities, like a bit of street lighting and your bins and things like that. And if we had a tariff and you could choose, yeah, I'll have the bins. How much are they? Okay, I'll have it twice a month, or once a week, or 3 times a year, and pay a certain amount. To me, that makes a lot more sense, that you could pick and choose the service you want. But no, there is this one service, and they say that it's mandatory, that you've got to have it because it's in legislation. And we're told that we've got to have this. You've got to send your children to school. Or if you then decide, actually, I don't want to send them to the state education, the state are now saying, okay, you can have them at home, but you've got to educate them to our curriculum. Again, all these rules and these regulations, which, because we've gone through that system, we feel that we have to abide. We have to do as these people say. People in comedy uniforms with truncheons and tall hats, not that you see very many of them with their tall hats these days, but they come and tell you, oh, I am the law, or I represent the law, and you have to do what we say. We've got the power. And because of that, we feel all the time that we're not free, that we've got to abide to these rules and these regulations, because somehow or other, these people who've put themselves into a position of so-called power can tell us what to do. But is that really right? Is that really true? If you're born, if you're a creature, a person, not a person, one of the people, if you're a people, a human being, let's say, using the Oxford English Dictionary definitions, not the legal, lawful Black Law's definitions, if I accidentally lapse into these old terms, then please forgive me, but I'm using the Oxford English Dictionary for things like person and people and things like that. If we're born, who has the right over us? No one. We're all born equal. There's nobody who has that power over us unless we acquiesce, unless we agree to it. Now, you do agree to all of this if you sign up to the electoral roll to be one of the persons to be governed by the government. But if you've decided, actually, do you know what, I don't want to be part of that system, then you ought to be free, because where do they get their ultimate power from? And we know, do we not, that the king takes an oath to a higher authority. He seeks a higher authority. He calls it God and the Bible. And he says, I promise to look after the traditions and the customs of the land, to a higher authority. So he becomes, in effect, a middleman. Well, I don't know about you, but I don't always like dealing with middlemen, thanks very much. I'd rather go to the higher authority and say, look, I'll have a look at your rules, seeing as you created me, and abide by those, because they seem a lot simpler and more helpful and beneficial to me than the man-made rules that governments and kings and these people who deem themselves to be the ones who want to boss us about. And because of that, it's very difficult to keep that mindset that we are already free if we just extract ourselves from the system that's pretending that we're not, with their rules and their regulations of you can do this and you can do that. Granted, they are the ones with the bigger sticks, and they have the people with the truncheons and the ones with the fake liability orders and the fake judges that can come and say, no, 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 you can't have those potatoes in that field because somehow you've offended something. You've changed the use of that land. You shouldn't do that. I mean, it is absolute a nonsense, isn't it? It seems to me, and a lot of people in the lawful truth movement, that actually we could get on very easily if we just abide to some very simple principles. I mean, one of those is love thy neighbor. That's in the Bible. If you love thy neighbor, you're not going to treat them badly. If you're going to treat them well, then you're considerate. You're thinking about the others. There's also that business about do no harm, cause no loss, cause no injury. These seem very simple principles to live by. And if you are, let's say, on the land and you decide to build a small hut so that you can have a little bit of privacy when you do a biological function, let's say. But you should be able to do that. You're not doing anybody any harm, and actually, in fact, you're hiding a function that some people might find distasteful. Now, I was on a site where a chap turned up and he looked across at this and he said, "What's that shed doing there?" And the guy whose land it was said, "Well, that's my composting toilet." He said, "You didn't get permission to put that up." He said, "What do you mean, get permission to put it up?" He said, "You need permission to put that up so that you can have a composting toilet." So he said, "Okay, let me ask you this question. Is it perfectly all right for me as a human being to have a biological function on the land? If I get a little bit, my bladder fills up, am I allowed to urinate?" "Yes, of course you are. That's a necessary function, and if there's nowhere else to go, you'd have to do it, wouldn't you? In the bushes or whatever, out of view of anybody." "Well, what about if I want to defecate then? Can I do that?" "Yes, of course you can. It's a biological function." So, in other words, you're saying that I can do those things in the open, in front of anybody else who happens to be passing, but if I decide to put a little wooden shed that's not damaging the land and actually is helping to fertilize the land using my excrement as fertilization for some plants and things, you're saying that if I put up a shed to do that in the privacy, that so I don't offend anybody else and I feel a little bit more happy with myself doing that in private, you're saying I need permission to do that? And well, I mean, it is an absurdity, isn't it? And he said, "Well, yes, you do need permission because you've put up a structure on the land." This is an absurd situation. These rules and these regulations that we are all told that we have to live by, not that we've agreed to them ourselves, but they are somehow inherent and part of the landscape, a part of the authority to keep us down, surely is not right. And to question it must be our free thinking ability to say, hang on a minute, let's just look at this. Is this sensible? Yes, here's a piece of land. For me to just suddenly put up a massive, great big structure that will annoy the neighbours and will cause a problem to the land, that's fair enough. And maybe we can come to some negotiation and an agreement. That's good. But for me to put up a few little sheds, to live on a little a house that's off the ground and not damaging the land underneath it, that it's a temporary structure, perhaps it's only made out of timber that will eventually crumble and not change anything, it's not I'm not actually near any neighbours or any of those things. Why should I not be able to do that? Why do I need your permission, Mr. Councillor, Mr. Planning Officer, Mr. Piece of the Government? Why do I need any of your permission to do anything? What gives you the authority over me? These are just questions that run through my mind. We are free people. We're only enslaved if we agree to it, and I don't agree to it. I don't wish to be enslaved. I don't wish to have and be associated with an ens legis, a legal fiction, a dead entity, a scam, a fraud. I don't wish to participate in all those terrible things. I simply wish to exist harmlessly, helping my neighbour, growing some food, doing some simple things, and having an honourable life. And in a good world, that should not be a problem. And the more of us, it seems to me, that have that similar attitude that, hang on a minute, where is your authority coming from? And who says that you can boss me about? To me, there is only one boss. There is only one authority. There is only one power that can have anything over me, and that is whatever it was that created me. The creator, the source, the universe, the ultimate, God, whatever. All these other bodies that are trying to play God, they're demigods, they're smaller gods. They should not have that power unless we say, do you know what? Yeah, I agree to be subservient to you. But if you don't wish to be subservient because they have become perhaps more dictatorial, or they are now dictators, that they are running tyranny, that they're trying to take and extract money from you all the time, and they're trying to boss you about and tell you how to live your life. Well, if that's the situation, that's not for me, thank you very much. And I question, where do you get your authority from? From some old tome that somebody else wrote, which you're calling legislation? No, thank you. That does not seem a sensible solution. Not to somebody who wishes to live very simply and honourably and out of your system and is asking nothing from you. And those odd services that I might want, which is perhaps cleaning the roads or having my bin collection or a bit of street lighting, I'm more than happy to pay for those services, but individually, from a tariff that I can pick and choose from. That to me seems a very sensible thing. Now, of course, there'll be some people who will say, no, we need to have rules and regulations, but let's agree on them. Let us agree rather than just have them walloped down upon us and say, there it is. Look at all these massive law books that you're supposed to know. And if you accidentally go a little bit too fast, or you park your conveyance on this little yellow line, or you stay here a bit too much, or you veer into a bus lane, or you step on the grass, or you accidentally have a bonfire that's, causing too much CO2, or you even breathe, or you drink the water, or you even think for yourself, then we take offence to that. That is absolute nonsense. Absolute nonsense. So all I'm saying is freedom is an attitude of mind, and we've got to remember, I feel, or at least I have to try and remember, that we are free unless we acquiesce and say, I'm in your system. You may disagree. You may think that that is complete nonsense, and of course you're entitled to disagree. Of course you are. That is the nature of conversation and living in a society together. Now follows a couple of posters of some events which you may wish to go and visit at. I don't think that I'm at any of those myself, but you may wish to go, and I hope you enjoy them. Thank you for watching if you did, and I will catch up with you on the next one. Till then, goodbye.